I can share.
I was gonna say, you can do that too if you want.
So, have you guys heard of ARCH or?
Very little.
Very little.
Very little, yeah.
So ARCH stands for Alternative Response for Community Health. It's a program we started in Ames in 2023. It took two. Time flies. So I work as a paramedic at Mary Greeley. I've been there since 2016. And so throughout kind of my years there, it kind of became apparent that we weren't doing really enough for a lot of our mental health patients. And you've probably been on calls where you kind of, you're sitting there and thinking like, something, this person does not need an ambulance for helping me, they need something more specialized or, you know, a better type of care. A lot of times we'd have people who are chronically kind of dealing with mental health issues and maybe suicidal a lot of the time, so they, you know, but they call 911 in that moment of crisis, and then, you know, we end up dragging them to the ER when really they've been there before, and that really doesn't help them out. That just kind of puts them back, you know, 2 steps instead of sending them in the right direction. So I met with Julie Saxton. Some of you may know her. She works for the Ames Police Department. She's their mental health advocate. And her and I sat down along with, not April, Kinsey, who's the mental health advocate at Iowa State University. So we kind of had a conversation in December of 2019. It was right before COVID. We were like, well, what can we do as, you know, police and EMS to try to improve our response to mental health? You know, the police were kind of handling some of it, and they do a great job, but they're not trained for it, and they typically don't have access or knowledge of resources available to be able to properly, you know, end the crisis appropriately. Usually it ends up, they'll call EMS, or they'll take somebody to jail, or just say, I'm sorry, there's nothing I can do type response. So 2019, we started researching other models, I guess, that we wanted to kind of mimic throughout the country. So there's different response models out there. I don't know if you've heard of some of them. Marshalltown has one called Impact. They're partnered with YSS. So they have social workers that respond with their police units. And it's kind of like a hybrid, like sometimes they go with the police, and sometimes they go first and then call PD if they're needed. But the social worker is stationed out of their police department there. There's Cahoots, which is based in Oregon, and that was one of the ones we looked closely at. And they partner an EMT or paramedic with a mental health worker, social worker, somebody in that capacity who has training in mental health, social work, things like that. And they run out of a clinic there in Oregon and respond on non-emergent 911 calls. And another program in Denver, the STAR program, was modeled after Cahoots, and we modeled after STAR. So we kind of looked at their model and decided to come up with something for Ames. So that's where ARCH kind of came about. We had some planning meetings with a lot of entities that are available in Ames. So, you know, some of the homeless, well, the one homeless shelter there, and then like some of the counseling services, Irely Ball, and people like that. We sat down for about a year, once a month, and kind of started fleshing this out, like what it would look like. And so as a paramedic, that was kind of one of the things I wanted to see. Part of the program was having kind of a trained medical professional there to do, like, you know, your EMT assessment, your BLS assessment, make sure there's actually not a medical issue or, you know, need for Narcan or glucose or anything like that, to do that kind of once over and intervene if necessary in that case. But also somebody who's trained in kind of scene management, scene safety, and then, you know, a lot of the stuff you can train, you know, like Lindsay was learned like how to talk on the radio, stuff like that, but more like scene management and kind of understanding like de-escalation, and having kind of a background in that. So that was the medical component that I wanted to see in the program, and then just somebody who can advocate for mental health patients who don't need hospital or jail or something else, you know, a worse outcome potentially. You know, we see on the news, places like Colorado had that, is it Elijah McCain, who got overdosed on ketamine because, you know, and there's a whole bunch going on there, but situations like that, you know, we didn't want to react, we wanted to kind of be proactive. So yeah, through funding, we got funding through grant funding from the Mary Greeley Foundation. And we bought a Dodge Durango and kind of upfit it with just some real basic identification, lights, and like one of the MCTs, like just a CAD, so we can pull up calls and communicate that way. We don't have like a base radio in the Durango, we just carry police radios like on our hip and that. And so we came up with what calls did we want to respond to, and so those included welfare checks, which Ames PD was no longer responding to. Primarily, like they would if they thought maybe there was actually like enough there to really suspect that something might be wrong, but sometimes it's just mom calling from out of state because my Iowa State student hasn't been heard from in a couple days. PD maybe wouldn't respond to that, and so we are starting to respond to those types of calls. But then in addition to that, there's mental health calls, or just those calls that kind of don't really have a law component to them, where somebody might need to be arrested or no trespass from a premises. It's more like, hey, this person's out in public shouting at clouds, and you know, people are calling it in, and so maybe we go and evaluate the situation for a medical need or just the need in terms of, you know, do they need somewhere to stay today? Are they in from out of town, like kind of came in on a bus and, you know, need to be directed to the shelter or somewhere where they can get the services they need. We do some medical calls. A lot of times we get called in by the EMS to say, hey, this is more like an arch situation, and we're gonna go back in service and you guys can kind of talk to this person. And that happens a lot with these people who are chronically suicidal, and I don't mean that negatively, like, I mean it like they often have thoughts of suicide, and it's not an acute or a new thing for them, but maybe at that point it's kind of overwhelmed them to the point of somebody, either they did or a friend of theirs called 911, and so they've been to the hospital, they have therapists, they have, you know, supports in place, they're on medication, so they don't necessarily need to go to an emergency room in that moment. And that's kind of where Lindsay steps in, because as EMS providers, we're trained, you know, if you're suicidal, that's, you know, there's no other choice at that point. We're gonna do everything in our power to get you to the ER. That's how I was trained, you know, if I have to sedate you because you're combative and you said you're suicidal, then we're gonna take you. And so we don't operate that way, and that kind of took some getting used to on my part, because somebody who talks like that, it's like, okay, we're gonna help you, and helping you is bringing you to the emergency room, like, but in reality that's often not the case, that they don't usually get the help that they need unless it's like a new thing. Then we're really looking at that closely. But Lindsay will kind of step in and say, you know, like, what supports do you have in place? What are your kind of tools that you use to what's the word, like, kind of calm the crisis down, I guess, like, and take it from up here to down here, and then reassess the situation. You know, we're not gonna leave them home alone in the dark with access to weapons, but we're gonna leave them home with somebody there, or access to somebody that knows them, who has a plan for the night, and feel comfortable with that. and potentially check back with them, the next day. We don't guarantee that, but, you know, if we think maybe, hey, a phone call is gonna be helpful in this situation, so, that's kind of where we operate. We don't do any emergent responses, so if there's like an actual emergency, someone's got a knife to their throat, you know, we might go to that call, but EMS and fire are gonna go as well, cause there's that potential for immediate, you know, response needed or immediate intervention. But often we'll go alongside, fire and PD. A lot of times because they're people that we've seen in, you know, chronically, like we see them all the time, which in EMS, you do see those people who frequently utilize the system, but on Arch, we spend a lot of time with them. So we're spending a couple hours sometimes with people, having conversations with them. So we really have time to build up that rapport with them. And so when we do respond, when that crisis gets to, you know, code red or whatever you want, you know, like when it's up to here, then fire and PD are there, but then we can kind of come in and really have that established communication with them, and that really helps de-escalate some situations pretty quickly. But yeah, if there is, because we've had some of our patients or people we encountered, you know, with weapons, you know, they have knives or whatever, but we've had interactions with them before, and so we can really get that situation de-escalated pretty quickly. We have been trying to respond to cardiac arrest calls for family support, and kind of being that point person to say, okay, here's the next steps, you know, and have a paramedic explaining what's going on, where they can go, what the procedures are, and even just cleaning up, you know, the mess that you inevitably kind of make when you're doing a code in a house. And Lindsay helps because she can start setting up, you know, the phone calls, or, you know, contacting, you know, whatever other family members might need to be called, because as EMS providers, we're not really good at that part, because we're so focused on the patient in the room who's, you know, dying. So we might have a chief or a captain or somebody who's there and explaining it, which I think is really good. But, you know, if we're there, we can really remove ourselves from the, you know, wanting to step in and help with the CPR and all that, but just more be there as like a support for the family or whoever. We've gone on welfare checks that end up being DOAs, and that saves the ambulance from having to come out, because I can go there and pronounce and then hand off care to PD instead of having one of our other medics in the ambulance tied up with that process, because we work still for Mary Greeley, so it's just a matter of, hey, there's obvious signs of death, you know, we're gonna pronounce at whatever time, have PD come out, call the ME, and then save that crew from having to do it. So, and then again, having Lindsay there as support for family members or people there, and we spend a lot of time there, because our calls aren't designed to be quick, like you know, we don't show up on scene, do the 10-minute, you know, trauma, what is it, platinum 10 minutes or whatever, like, we're not, that's a lot of training I had to relearn, was spending a lot of time with people and on the scene, kind of sitting down on their couch or on their chairs and like talking with them in that situation. So, yeah, those are some of the calls that we typically go on, and then anything like the sergeant at the PD is like, hey, this sounds like an Arch situation. We put notes in their CAD so they could read any interactions we've had with people. And so if they see that we've talked to them several times this week or this month, and they'll call us out with them. And oftentimes we'll say, hey, we've got this and you guys can go. And they're like, yes, we don't have to be tied up in this. Not because they don't want to, but there's just a lot more that they're able to do in the meantime. Like, they're not social workers, and Lindsay is, so a lot of those situations don't really need them to be there. They can do a really good job of it for the most part, but, you know, inevitably they're just not the right people to do that job. So yeah, we are employed by the hospital, but we do work very closely with PD to make sure that we're kind of keeping tabs on the people that we need to know about. So we operate on their police channel, but we're dispatched through the same like EMS locution, so it comes out over our Greeley dispatch channel, so. The paper I handed out, that's our kind of 2023, it's not a fiscal year report, it's a January through December, so you can kind of see some of the highlights there of calls we've been on. There's a little map there in the corner, kind of shows a cluster. Iowa State, there is kind of somewhat of a gap there on the map. That's mostly where the university is. They have mental health advocates there, and they typically are in contact with people before we are. Not that we don't get called, but they're usually responding because they have their own police department too. So we don't have as many calls in that area, but we are kind of making progress in getting response out to mental health. And then you just see a breakdown of kind of the call types there, that green graph. So Lindsay put this all together. The missed calls, those are ones we tracked calls like in the meantime when we weren't in service. So we were in service Monday through Friday, mostly 7 to 3, 7 to 15, and then a couple nights from 15 to 23. And we missed about 559 calls in a year that could have been responded to by Arch and handled. And then, we're trying to avoid people going to the ER and avoid people tying up ambulances and police and things like that. And that's kind of our goal, is really just to assist with those mental health calls and welfare checks and things where, just might need more time and specialized care. Like I kind of think of it like you have a hazmat unit in a fire department, right? Like they're there, they're trained, they don't go on every call, but they're specialized in one certain area that, when it's needed, you can go out and kind of avert that situation or whatever. So we're not, call volume isn't like, even though the city wants to know like how many calls you go on, like the number doesn't really matter. It's like you're getting the right people to be in the right situation, so that you're not sending the wrong guy to the call, right? It's just another specialized team, really is how I look at it. So yeah, does anybody have any questions? Or I have the bag here that I carry, but it's really like nothing you haven't seen before. But I just figured I'd bring it in.
So is this primarily just for the Ames, like inside Ames city limits, or do you also sometimes do different locations in terms of outside of Ames PD location?
So right now we are funded by City of Ames, and so we stay within the city. We're also funded through the hospital as well. But we are having conversations about looking at Huxley, Gilbert, Story City, some of the bigger communities that aren't like way out, in Story County.
Is it similar to like mobile crisis?
Yeah, so we did, that was one of the kind of people we talked to early on, was like, hey, we're not trying to duplicate your service, but mobile crisis is its own separate phone number, and we're really catching the 911 calls where people haven't heard of mobile crisis before, or they're calling and they're just like, I don't know what to do, so I'm calling 911.
And sorry, and internet, mobile crisis is just like mental health, suicide. So like the people that are, like the welfare checks wouldn't come through that. Like if you're concerned about somebody, mobile crisis isn't gonna just show up out of the blue. Like it has to be.
Usually our officers will request mobile crisis. I just didn't know if you guys were similar to what they do.
To what mobile crisis does in terms of a response.
Just in like the
In
mental
general.
health stuff.
Yeah.
Because I feel like a lot of their calls are mental health, so I just didn't know if
mobile
it was.
crisis is all mental health.
Yeah.
Yeah. So and that's what it's just mental health. So.
But they go like all over the county, right?
They have a region, in fact, like it's like 3 counties or something.
It's like I can't remember the number, but it's like certain ones of the funding for it. They're really low on numbers right now for staff, so I don't even know what they're covering. But
Zeroing. I had to zeroing the other day.
yeah, so really, yeah, it is just mental health calls, and it has to be like a voluntary, like the person wants them to come, wants to engage with them. Whereas we're doing
You show up
I
as
think-
911, yeah.
Yeah, it's more of a, it's a different approach,
We look at it as like, people are still gonna call 911 for any number of things, so we're just trying to put a specific team in place for things that might get called that really don't fit one of the traditional 3 responses.
How many paramedics and social workers do you have working in this ARCH program right now? Is it just you two?
Just like you're looking at them. So, well, that's
no,
not.
that's not true. He's lying to you.
It's just
It's myself, I'm full-time, and then we have, somebody who has 15 hours in addition to me, so that's the 3 days a week that, or 2 or 3 days a week that she stays until 11 usually. And then we have other paramedics that kind of jump in, 3 shifts a week, I'd say, so.
So right now,
They're it's a part-time in addition to our 40 hours, but that's, we're
Okay.
funded for 56 hours a week.
yeah, so I'm 40 hours, she's 40 hours, and then, like, do you know Rod Jones? You maybe know him, he's been around a while. He does it. Steve Flugrad, who's one of our medics, he does it. And they just do like an 8-hour day, so it's, yeah.
Yeah.
But they're all still paid through, like, the program, but they're still hospital employees.
Mhm.
If you wanna get technical on that, but, yeah, it's been, I think, very impactful. I think the police are really supportive of the program. They, like having us around. One of the hard things, the challenges is, how do you go to like a city council or like, your stakeholders and say, yeah, we made a difference in somebody's life, because you can say we did 600 calls, and they'll say, well, why didn't you do 700? Because it's not really about the numbers. At least we're kind of realizing, like, you could respond to, there's no magic number of calls that's gonna like be impactful. It's, what have you done on each of these calls, and how do you, and you can't really, there's no metric to say, how well we did with somebody, because you never know what the outcome is, because it's such a long-term process of, getting them help, and then they relapse, or they, something happens, and, so we're never just solving a problem and it's done, and so that's one of the challenges, is like, they wanna see that. That's what city politicians wanna see, is like, how did you change, cause we're not essential, like, just like EMS isn't essential, like, the fire department's gonna be there whether, they have calls or not, they gotta be there, so. Yeah, I think that's the frustrating part too, is like, we know we're doing something that's helpful, but they see it as, well, if you don't go on these calls, the police are just gonna go anyway, so.
How is Mr. Schenker doing all this? How's he liking it, liking the impact that ARC is having as our city manager?
So, we gave a presentation, that's why I kind of brought that point up. The city council and the Mary Greeley board had a meeting, and we kind of gave an update, because it was, the city did actually fund this past year, on kind of like a trial basis. And he's really just, so the police department is really like for it. And, some of the people in the city are like, well, we think it's good, but, there's, again, you can't, if you guys aren't there, it'll just go to someone else. Like, so there's kind of that struggle to be like, yes, they do want us there, and he is doing his job and saying like, well, what's the cost and this and that. So, I don't fault him for being good at his job, but it is frustrating. It's like, they all want us here. The police department, they're like best friends with us all, they say that, but, so we'll see where it goes. We've got funding through the next year, so the end of fiscal year 25, would it be?
Yeah, through June of 25.
So, and it's really, like, operationally speaking, there's not, once we bought the vehicle and we had just a few upfits to it, there's not a lot of cost involved other than paying us. We put gas in the car, it's a city vehicle, so it, we take it to the city shop, it's just like any one of their fleet vehicles, so, yeah, it's, cost-wise, I think
and you don't bill for your calls, if you don't, like an ambulance would send a bill for a transport for a response, you don't do that.
And we do offer, like, we have given rides before. From an EMS standpoint, it's not a medical call. It just falls under like, hey, if getting you a ride is what's gonna help you, we're happy to do it, but we kinda do it on case by case. Like, we have to feel both comfortable and not feel like they're gonna, pull a weapon or something like that. We do have the child locks on in the back, just as an extra precaution, but there's no barrier, right? It's not a cop, cause we don't want it to feel like the police are there. So, the uniforms are pretty subdued. The car has like the logo on the door and just some amber and white lights really, and it, so we blend in pretty well, I think. I can tell because
No one
when
waves at us.
no one
when
waves
we're
at us,
driving around.
like pass a cop, they always wave at the ambulance, then nobody waves at us. But yeah, we're just really trying to, do something good and be a tool that the community has, and
Do you have any advice or tips for us if we were to like respond to a mental health call here in the Huxley area, on kind of like do's and don'ts of kind of working with them and like getting them the help that they need?
That's a good one,
That's a good
especially
question.
and to piggyback off of Kelly's question, like, especially with like regulars, cause in Ames, you have your response to places where you go there more often than others. Your regulars, quote unquote, and that happens in a smaller town like this too. So to piggyback off what you're saying, like, any tips or tools for those to prescribe specifically?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard for me to answer that just because of coming from, I know that you guys have your protocols and so it's hard to like, if you guys, somebody's suicidal, do you guys have to transport them?
Yeah.
I mean, essentially,
Yeah,
like, there's not really, like, you can't like safety plan with them, or you
No.
can't, okay, yeah, so like, not coming from that side of things, it's hard, I don't know, like, my go-tos, I feel like they kinda contradict what your what EMS protocols, like, that's been, like what he said, that's a learning curve, and so, but I think there's a lot to be said about just, I mean, I don't think what I would recommend is any different than what you would treat, like an EMS. It's just, just your general, like, a kind person to them, but I mean,
Yeah, I would, sorry.
well, I'm just saying, it's just hard because I think a lot of those calls, even if you had like all the resources, it's unfortunate that you guys couldn't like utilize them to the extent that where it would be helpful and probably more impactful than just transporting to the hospital or dropping them, and so,
Absolutely.
I guess my resource would be like you guys pushing to have us respond with you guys. I think would be wonderful, but yeah, I think one thing to always do is like hand out like those information, like making sure people have the mobile crisis number so that they have the options to utilize the resources that are more appropriate than you guys. So if that's, or reminding them like, hey, do you have a therapist? Have you guys talked to her like when you're feeling like this? What are they saying?
That's
That's
us.
not me. I'm like, how do I turn it down? What do they say to do? And like remind them what they have in place and reminding them to utilize that, I think goes a long way. But giving them the tools of like mobile crisis 988, the 211 website, and just kind of just keep feeding them the other resources they could use besides 911. And I think might take a little while, but sometimes that might sometime get through their head of, oh, I don't have to call 911, I can call mobile crisis, or even just sitting down and writing like out, like here are the other options you guys can try before you call us next time.
So that next time maybe you avoid that call. Cause we do that too. We'll say, hey, don't forget mobile crisis can help you, and then, but I would say like from an EMS point of view, one of the things I try that, often don't succeed at is, those frequent utilizers is, don't treat them like they're frequent utilizers. Like every time they call, you show them the same empathy and compassion that you would if it's, somebody who's calling, with a major trauma, because crisis takes different forms for different people. And, you know, just because you think that it's the 17th one that month, and it might be, you know, who are we to say that that's not the, you know, that might be the big one or whatever. You know, you can still be friendly, compassionate, you know, and it, you know, we kind of have our fun with them, like, after the fact and kind of, but, you know, be lighthearted about it, don't be demeaning even behind their back, you know, like, we kind of, like, I volunteer out in Collins, so that's where I live, and we have 1 or 2 people that we often see, and it's, you know, we make lighthearted jokes, and I do it, it wouldn't be anything I wouldn't say right to her, because she's just kind of a quirky lady, you know, and so, but it, you know, having that attitude changed how I treat every patient, because it's, you know, I no longer become frustrated with, oh, here we go again, you know, but it's more, hey, how can I help them today, you know, and yeah, so that's kind of what I would say from an EMS point of view, because I've been there, been on calls in the middle of the night, and you're like, why in the world did you pick up the phone and dial 911 right now? So, you know, but having that fresh perspective, I think has been helpful.
So with y'all's hours, primarily it's daytime operation. You don't have a lot of touch or interaction with YSS. I know you said the parent companies were involved with YSS elsewhere, but
Do we have contact with the
yeah,
YSS?
yeah. Is it primarily like adult community? Because YSS is
Oh, like with kids and stuff?
yeah.
Oh, yeah, no, yeah, we do.
Yeah.
You do.
Mhm. With like with the, youth population,
Yeah.
not necessarily YSS, like specifically the organization, but
Kids who might be from there have been
Might be
there.
connected.
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I would say we have,
Good enough.
5-year-olds all the way up to 99-year-olds,
Oh.
whatever.
And we've been to the high school and they.
We've been in nursing homes too.
Yeah,
for
we were just there
suicide,
today,
yeah,
but,
all kinds.
and we just, part of it too is like building rapport with staff at some of these places too, and then they know to call us back instead of, they now request us to like over 911, like, hey, you just need to send up, in the same way you'd say, hey, I just need a police officer, they say, hey, I think we need Arch to come out to this, you know.
So that's the kind of the best way to get you to a scene is you still have to go through 911, but just clarifying that I don't need police, I don't need an ambulance, it's just I need the Arch team.
Right, and the dispatch will still go through like the pro QA and all their
Mhm.
questions,
Mhm.
and then if they still determine it's a medical, they send the ambulance,
Mhm.
but oftentimes we might piggyback with them and say, hey, we'll self-dispatch, cause I think we know who this is, and so and because we work at Greeley, then we're right there with the medics, and we can be like, we can kind of powwow a little bit beforehand, kind of make a plan, and then go from there. So we're like, hey, we know this person, you know, we were just there yesterday, blah, 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 and kind of, and then usually we'll take the lead on that, and they'll kind of be there in case things go sideways.
Just anticipating, because YSS is gonna be out here pretty soon. I'm just wondering like, how much of that, if we were to push to have Arch extend,
Oh, you mean like the, facility
yeah,
Mhm.
at Cambridge?
it's built out here,
Yeah.
and it's gonna be here soon, so, you know, as opposed to popping people in the bus and taking them to Greeley, where they sit in our unit back there,
Right.
waiting to speak to IPT, you know, we can, maybe get out an Arch.
So they will be there they should be there, that's a placement that the ER is putting them in, so hopefully it's not gonna go back the other way.
Oh,
Like, it
right.
would not,
I got you,
you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
not to say it won't, cause
good, right.
it will, but it's you should not, I mean, I guess I don't know,
I wonder what they have in place there, but.
yeah, it should be, they're going there from the hospital as the placement option, I think, for, not all, I guess I don't know all the programs that they're having out there, but, yeah,
It's gonna drive our calls up, I just know that much.
yeah, but hopefully they have other things there that, yeah,
No,
it's a good question.
oh, it'll be C-Town. Oh, wow.
Yeah, do they have their own, does Cambridge have their own?
Ambulance?
First
No.
responders,
No.
but not.
You guys cover them?
Nope, Story
No.
County.
Story County, technically.
Why are you worried about it?
Yeah,
I
right?
don't know.
You're so kind, you're worried about everybody else.
Yeah.
So how do you deal with people that are identifying as different things now?
Well, how do we do about it?
Yeah, how,
No different than I do with anything else, yeah. It doesn't change anything. It's pretty irrelevant, actually, to what we do, cause there's still, I mean,
so example,
I don't
we,
even ask.
so example, right now, we have one that's kind of frequent that identifies as a cat.
Right.
how does it change how you do anything? I
So,
mean, yeah, I don't even ask the question, yeah.
you know,
I truly don't, I mean.
they
I-
don't wanna be identified as a human, so
Mm.
do we call the vet, or, you know?
Well, they're calling for you, right? Are they calling for you?
I don't,
Oh, okay. Well, I'm assuming if.
suicidal, you know, they're suicidal, it's a suicidal cat, you know, so.
Right, then I would, skim right over it and just treat them just like, you're here as EMS. And that's what I don't even usually feed into it. But that's an approach I have, like, I mean, it's everybody to their own, but,
I mean, it is,
yeah.
there is an element of mental illness there that, you know, is taking form, you know, and so you still treat them with dignity and, you know, just make sure.
What are you there for? And I focus on that, like, if they're there for suicide, okay, what can we do to keep you safe? Whether you're a cat or a furry or whatever they're going by these days, like, what are we there to assist with and focus on that and just, you know, just like if it's high blood sugar, okay, how do we address that? Whether or not they're male, female, or whatever, I mean, you're there to address whatever issue it is, and so I just keep the focus on that and someone else can deal with the rest. But, yeah.
I mean, so that's the issue we're struggling with is, you know, they wanna be treated like a cat, so, you know, how do you,
Like,
How do
give
you
me an example, like,
how do you treat somebody that wants to be treated like a cat, you know?
Well, they actually, like,
But-
in the school system have a litter box, like the teachers accommodate.
yeah, but I mean, I think I don't know what your protocols are, but like, you are here within these parameters, like, I hear what you want, but this is what I can do, like,
Yeah,
it's,
okay.
you know, it's just like,
I mean, you can
I
tell
would,
them, like,
yeah,
we will not bring you to a vet, we're gonna bring you to a hospital, you know, and treat their issue that's at hand. And
these are our options to help you right now, and if you don't, I mean, and go in that route and just kind of, I mean, my default also is like, okay, like giving them, again, these are the options, this is what I have to offer you, and let them choose from those options, like, you can sit, I don't know what, I can't even imagine what what they're presenting you with, but, I mean, do they wanna go to the vet, is that seriously what they're asking for? Have you gone out on them?
Yeah,
Okay,
and
well,
then they disregard, okay, well,
okay, thank you, have a good day.
it came back home, or, you know, it got loose, it got out, you know, the door was open, so it got out.
Okay.
that might be like it,
Hey, I go with it, I mean, I
Yeah.
just, okay,
yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
thanks, I will see you later. I don't know, that's,
That's how the world is.
yeah, I don't know. Just do your job, move on.
It's very hard to take that serious, you know what I'm saying?
Well, you don't have to take it serious, you can still go there and ask the questions you need to ask and
Yeah.
be done. And just, I mean, don't even, okay, I mean. I would just treat it like it's not, and I would just ask the same questions, even if it's a cat, I would still ask the human questions.
Okay.
Sorry, I cannot, you know, these are the questions I have to ask. This is it, like, just staying in your lane. And either they'll stop calling because they don't like it, or they'll start answering your questions, or they'll, you know,
Toe the line.
what's that?
Toe the line. You know, within our scope, like you
Yep.
said, and,
Stay in, yeah, this is what I can do.
yeah.
Yeah, nothing wrong with that, I don't think.
Anything else?
I I would enjoy that call, so if you're gonna call,
Yeah.
I'll come handle it for you. I like to have I like those interesting calls sometimes, but,
Sometimes.
yeah, so I mean, those would be good ones for, obviously it's not an emergent, you know that, right? So like, those would be great calls that would be fine for us to take, whatever, how long does it take to get here from Mary Greeley? 15 minutes? 20, I mean, that would be fine to be like, Arch is gonna go and assess first, and if they need an ambulance, then we would call you guys. Especially if there's a history there and you've gone through the routine before, those would be great calls to start with. If we start going outside of the city of Ames, I think,
Yeah.
cause there's really, can't really fail there, I mean,
So right now you just stick to Ames?
right
For
now,
now,
yeah,
yeah. We're kind of exploring again, like I said, the
we're
Gilbert
gonna,
Huxley kind of circle where, Gilbert's basically adjacent to Ames, the other guys aren't far off, and, even Nevada's reasonable for most things, and
Although
because
you may
Paul
spend
Bog-
your whole night in Nevada if you're there.
What's that?
You may spend the entire day in Nevada.
Oh, that's true, we may need to buy
You
another,
need to have a whole nother crew for that one.
yeah.
yeah, it's hard because we're trying to approach the conversation with Shankert because I don't know he gives all the money, so then for us to say we're gonna start responding to outside of the city, if we're not available for the city and he's paying for it, like how, we just gotta navigate that a little. So the conversations are starting, I guess, but.
And it's almost like you're 2 people short if you're looking at 467 responses out of 1026.
Or a whole shift for sure, because it's outside those 8 hours that, yeah.
So if you can start to quantify, like, from each call that you're saving,
Yep.
like ambulance coming out and,
Mm-hmm.
okay, if we had 2 more people and start showing them that delta, it could maybe help.
Yep, yeah, so we have this all broken down even further about like how many were actually, if we weren't in service, what would have gone? Like,
Yeah.
would it have been an ambulance, would have been
Yeah.
fire, or all three for that matter. Cause typically, somebody would have had to respond, or would have had gone to somebody, whether it's a phone call or just whatever, so, yeah, I don't know why it's so hard to get funding, it's like pulling teeth, and I don't get it, but, 56 hours is, they won't even consider expanding it until we have more numbers, like higher numbers. And I don't know how to recruit 911 calls. If that's even a thing. So, nor that I don't even know if we want to do that. That sounds like a very
Well, and it's, part of it
dangerous
is like,
path to go down.
like with the fire department, they're there regardless, if they do 1 call a month, or,
They're on
maybe-
duty.
Right, they're always there, and so we can't justify that because we're not essential, because these calls will just go to another staffed unit, but our push is like, hey, we're being more efficient with the system.
Especially ambulances. Mary really doesn't always have a lot of ambulances out and
Well,
available.
yeah, and that's the thing, how many times we've been at a call, like if we weren't there, they would have been there, and how many times they would have had a call from Boone or
Oh, yeah.
or even just the fact that there's been several times where we've been on a call and a CPR or cardiac arrest comes in, and if we weren't in service, they would have been waiting for out of county response to that.
Yeah, so, but then you tell them that, and they're like, it's like, it doesn't matter.
Unless they've seen it, they're like, eh.
So it's just like where you guys can go separate, or do you go as a team each
Mhm.
time?
We're
Yeah.
always two.
Always a team, so it's not like in the slip seat situation where
Yeah.
kind of adjust the scheduling a little bit and get a little bit more coverage, but.
Well, it's mostly like safety and just being able to kind of have 2
Yeah.
sets of eyes on everything.
Yeah.
So,
Well, yeah, and also like he said, she said, right? Like you're one-on-one with some of these people. I just,
Yeah.
yeah.
now she'll do, like, sometimes we'll determine from the notes, like, oh, this can be a phone call.
Yeah.
And so we just have a phone that we use and say, oh, yeah, we'll make a phone call, figure this out, and then we don't have to even turn the wheel, so.
So, if the state becomes EMS essential service, would you guys fall underneath that program or not?
It's a good question, no, I'm not sure.
Okay.
Cause we are
You
Like,
are.
I'm a Mary
you
Greeley
are-
paramedic,
yeah.
so, but I don't know that Arch would follow suit, but maybe we can, cause I don't think the unit we drive is classified as like an emergency vehicle.
Well, mental health is not essential. I don't, well, I guess I can't say that, cause
I'm not sure now.
I know. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's safe to say that if you start expanding, Huxley would definitely be very welcoming of your services. We would definitely appreciate having you come down and help us.
It's good to know.
Yeah, we will, yeah, like it's been on our radar, so,
Mhm,
you know, people ask anytime we go somewhere, oh, do you go out to the county? And I mean, really the only obstacle is the time, like getting to and from, you know, a call.
Right,
because-
but even if we just started it with like ones like that you guys know are not, like, you would be comfortable saying Arch is gonna come and you know what I mean, like you guys, I don't know how that's determined, but if you guys have ideas, I mean, I guess that's something to be thinking about, like how, what does that look like for your guys' response and your community in terms of like deciphering and determining what would be appropriate for us to go to, or how that would look for us to respond with you guys without you guys sitting there for 30 minutes with people, like, you know what I mean, I don't know,
You could talk with PD.
yeah. Just,
PD and dispatch is you, and we'll probably talk to county dispatch, just,
That's
you know,
me.
when we, that's,
oh really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
so.
Yeah,
That's,
like, so do you think you feel like, would you have a good handle on like, okay, this would be a good one for,
Yeah.
based on, I don't know how long you've been there, but.
About a year and a half, but yeah. I mean, I don't know about the newbies, but
Yeah.
there's plenty of calls where. Well, and I like to go through and look at the notes on the Arch calls and figure out what, like, cause I just think it's interesting when they call you and when they say Arch isn't available and stuff.
Yeah.
So I'll go through and read them just to.
When you guys see Flu Grad every now and again, yeah, while you're in there, she's
Mr. or
our
Mrs.
Mrs. She's our medical director
Yeah,
here, so
yeah.
playing a bug in her ears, conversations keep going.
Yeah, she's on board with it, it's really a matter of
the city,
the city,
yeah.
Is that right?
yeah, no, they don't, she go, yeah,
That's Haddonfield.
she's cool with it. Yep. So,
Well, thank you guys for coming out. We
Yeah,
really
sure.
appreciate it.
yeah.
Thanks for having us. If you have any questions too, like you can, I think you have my email, Kelly, so
That's your email.
you can share it, or just my work email, so I don't always answer.
Okay.
Or I think Arch